Welcome to Season 2 of Healing the Tigress, a podcast of conversations and stories on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. We are your hosts, Peggy, a perinatal mental health therapist,
and Jasmine, a clinical pharmacist who is perinatal mental health certified. As Taiwanese American mothers who lived through postpartum depression and anxiety, we felt like we didn't hear about other AAPI mothers struggling with their mental health in new motherhood. But we knew it couldn't just be us.
So we created this podcast because we hope that sharing these stories can start to break the stigma of mental health in our community and help heal the inner tigress in all AAPI parents.
Welcome to this week's episode of Healing the Tigress. We've talked a lot about aspects of pregnancy and postpartum before, but we've really only touched upon the topic of breastfeeding in a few episodes. And breastfeeding is a beautiful but often challenging part of the postpartum journey. And for many new mothers, it can have a significant impact on both the physical and mental health. From the early days of nursing to navigating emotional ups and downs, this experience can shape a mother's well-being in profound ways. So today, we'll dive into how holistic approaches like Ayurvedic-inspired practices can support new moms through this transformative time. And we'll also explore how nourishing both body and mind can ease the postpartum transition.
We're thrilled to be joined by Anhoni Patel, the founder of Mrs. Patel's, a company that creates Ayurvedic-inspired treats and teas designed to support pregnancy, lactation, and women's health. As a mother of two, Anhoni understands firsthand the challenges and beauty of the postpartum journey, especially when it comes to breastfeeding. Anhoni, thank you so much for being on our podcast today and sharing your journey both into motherhood and postpartum traditions. I myself partook in many of Mrs. Patel's cookies during my nursing journey, and honestly, I would still eat them today if I got my hands on some. Could you tell us a bit about who you are, your cultural heritage, and a little bit about your own postpartum experience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's such an honor. I love chatting about this topic, and I'm excited to have an hour with you talking about it. So thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Anhoni Patel. I am based in San Francisco, and I founded Mrs. Patel's in 2012, so about 13 years ago. And what we do is very specific. We make foods with Ayurvedic herbs to support pregnancy, lactation, postpartum healing, and general women's wellness, such as menstruation and menopause. So we have got your back from the moment you need us, from the moment you menstruate to when you're at the end of your menstruation journey, if you will, and you're in menopause. So we have foods, as I said, that have Ayurvedic herbs, and Ayurveda is an ancient Indian medicinal system. So the herbs, much like Chinese medicine or Eastern medicine, are very powerful. They've been used for thousands of years. And the recipes for our products have been passed down from mother to mother within our family for generations. So when my children were born, my mother made them for me, my grandmother made them for my mom, my great-grandmother made them for my grandmother. So they're very old. I did change them somewhat to be a little bit more palatable to the American palate, right? Adding chocolate and whatnot. And they still, while they have, chocolate or peanut butter or caramel, they still retain a lot of that ancient knowledge. And it is such an honor for me to be able to share such an important part of our family with other mothers, new parents all around the U.S. I was born and raised in New York. My background is from India. And I should also add that my husband is Korean. He was born in Korea and he was raised in Guam. So we have a nice mix in our family. My kids are, Indian, Korean, and also have a good amount of Pacific Islander culture because that is where my husband is from. So it's very multicultural and I love it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I believe your kids are a little bit older since you've been doing this for quite a while, huh?
Yes, they are now 15 and 13. And I started the company when my daughter was 4.5 months old, which I do not recommend anyone doing ever. Clearly, I was in the postpartum haze to even do something like that. And they're less than 2 years apart. So I had 2 children in diapers in the full effect. And I did not have nannies or babysitters or family that live in San Francisco, much less the country of America, the United States.
One thing I really love about your postpartum experience is that you had the support you received from your own mother, Mrs. Patel herself. How much of that support also was like this sort of passing down of generations of traditions in your family? So I love that you guys did that. During your pregnancy and even prior, what were your expectations of what postpartum and breastfeeding would look like?
I'm going to be honest, I was pretty surprised. And all my mom friends, because I was in a large mothers group, we were all pretty surprised. And we had read all the books. We'd taken the classes. I took labor and delivery classes. I took breastfeeding class. I read all the books, like many of my mom friends had. But I was still shocked at postpartum, and I was still shocked at some of the breastfeeding challenges that I had faced. Like, I had read about them, but I hadn't fully grasped how hard postpartum was. And I was the first of my very close friends to have a child. And what I wished that I have, and this is one of the reasons it's so great that you have this podcast and that there's social media out there, is that I wish I knew more information. I wish I had like an older sister, an older friend who had gone through the process, or anyone that had gone through the process. They did not need to be older than me. And said, listen, watch out for X, Y, and Z, or this might happen. And not in an alarmist way, but just an informational way, because despite the books, despite the classes, I was somewhat caught unawares.
What would you say is like the most surprising part when you first started your postpartum journey in terms of like the thing that you're like, oh, no one told me about this?
Right. So I had 2 natural childbirths with midwives at a hospital. And I did not know some of the things that could happen to my body after I had my children. Naturally or C-section, but I had natural childbirth. I did not know what road burn was. I don't know if you guys experienced this. I had read about tearing. I did not have the full understanding of postpartum tearing and how one needs to heal it, how painful it can actually be, and just the different elements of what happens to your body when your hormones are balancing. For example, postpartum sweating, postpartum body odor. I thought, okay, I had tough pregnancies. I was on bed rest with my son from 3 months onward, full bed rest, and with my daughter, 7.5 months onward. And so I, had very high risk pregnancy with my son. And so I was like, okay, Anhoni, get to the finish line. Once you have the baby, you are in the clear. You'll be safe. And you'll feel so much better. Then I had my children and I did not feel so much better. I wasn't at risk of my life, but I was experiencing a lot of pain. And if I did not have my mom with me and all the foods, and this is hand to God, if I did not have my mom with me and her making all those foods for me and doing so many things, I can go into some of the things that she did for me, my healing would have taken so much longer. I think I would have had some mental health challenges because I was so under. And I am so grateful for her because she supported me in such a strong mama bear way, fully, with nutrition, physical help, everything. She had it under control. And so many people don't have that. And they kind of get sucked under the waves, so to speak, of postpartum. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed, especially with your first child. I mean, you don't know what to expect. Second child, you're like, okay, I think I have a little of an idea. It can still be hard because it's so different. Third children, what I've heard from third children, it's like, yeah, they parent themselves. You're fine. Like, you go to work an hour later. So I was surprised. And I think like I said earlier, many other women and new parents are quite surprised as well.
And you mentioned to us your husband's Korean, and Koreans also have special postpartum traditions. Sounds like your mom was really the focus and the main support during your postpartum experiences, I'm assuming doing the Ayurvedic traditions. But did you also incorporate any Korean traditions into your postpartum recovery? Or what are some of those traditions that helped you through the healing?
Yes, so I feel very lucky because my mother, in my culture, Indian, and my husband's culture, my mother-in-law, the Korean culture, both have very strong postpartum traditions. They lock that down. Okay, they're going to support you. So with both my children, my mother came first. So my mother stayed with me for about 3 months with my son because she had to go back to work. And then my mother-in-law came for 5 months from Korea. And then with my daughter, my mom came for 6.5 months because she was retired. And then my mother-in-law came. So for that first several months, which are so integral to your body, my mother was there, but then my mother-in-law locked that down. So for example, seaweed soup is so important, and what you have kind of from day one, as soon as you're cleared to eat or drink after delivery, and is something that one drinks and is prepared for you every morning. You try to have it a couple times a day. You get to make a big pot, and you have that for at least 3 months. And this is wonderful because I'm vegan actually. And what seaweed has is a lot of iron. And what you need after that blood loss of having a child, whether C-section or natural, is you need to replenish your stores. And that is just such a simple, basic food that you can have that nurtures you. There's also the same two traditions of resting after you have a child. Like my mom had to kind of physically make me rest. And part of that, having you rest, is that someone in your life, my mom, my mother-in-law, they are there to pick up the work. So while I'm resting, my mom was taking care of the house, making me food. When I had 2 children, taking care of my son. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law, because they both came, did the same thing. So you have that support. While you're resting, you're not sitting there, because resting can be stressful because the things need to get done. The tasks still need to get done. So it's not helpful to force someone to rest, but you not pick up the pieces. And I was fortunate enough to have people that allowed me to rest, forced me to rest kindly, and also picked up all the slack, picked up all the work, so to speak, on my behalf, so that no beat was missed. And that's special. And I feel very grateful and lucky.
Yeah. You did mention too, like without your mother, or in this case, both your mother and your mother-in-law, you may have maybe ended up developing perinatal mental health disorders. You know, this is what our podcast is about, right? Like we focus on perinatal mental health disorders. And it's interesting because we also see in other Asian cultures this more focus on these postpartum traditions. And I've always wondered the impact they have on decreasing things like postpartum depression. How do you think having these postpartum traditions and support from both your mother and mother-in-law, how do you think it may have prevented that for you?
It's hard to say, and I should add that I am not a medical professional or a mental health professional at all. So this is anecdotal to my experiences, but I feel that it was integral for me because there's 2 ways to get, there's postpartum blues, which is the hormone balancing, right? And that's a lot of people go through that. You go through that after you have a child. You can go through that after weaning. But then there's postpartum depression, which can come out from all the overwhelm that one might feel. You might already have some challenges, mental health challenges, going into pregnancy and going into motherhood that you've already had previously. So as a non-expert, want to clarify that there's things that you can do via handling it, having support. And there's things that you need intervention and you need medication. And what I experienced and what I can speak to is just that overwhelm, feeling so overwhelmed, you're drowning. And it's one thing after another, because while you are trying to heal, and you guys know what I'm talking about, you're also taking care of a very fragile human being. And to do both at the same time, to change 10 diapers an hour, 6 diapers an hour with a newborn. And I made them, for me, it was a mistake to use cloth diapers with my son. What was I thinking? Because I had cloth diapers when my brother and my mom. And so I did not compare myself to this woman. And so I was, wanted to do that. So I'm changing all these diapers and you're trying to heal and you're bleeding and it just piles up. With the healing and the baby, the new responsibilities that one has, especially with the first child when you're new to all this, and you're tired. So I want to address sleep deprivation. The sheer level of sleep deprivation is Navy SEAL training level sleep deprivation. I have this joke. I'm like, any mom I know could be a Navy SEAL. They could go through that test because they have the things that new parents do, new mothers do, new parents do on little to no sleep is outstanding. And, I know there's some people and their kids sleep through the night very early on, but newborns can't sleep through the night. They have to feed at least every 2 hours. And I was fortunate enough to have my second child. My daughter slept only 2 hours until she was 2 years old. I even took her to like a pediatrician, sleep specialist, but that's the way it was. And then she only slept 4 to 6 hours for the next 2 years. So for 4 years, I did not get full rest. And I have, my husband is super hands-on. Like he is not traveling for work. He's there. And with my son, he would give a bottle so I can get extra rest. My daughter refused to take a bottle. It was very hard. So the sleep deprivation, which your body needs to heal, what you need for your mind to reset, no matter what. I mean, some people have night nannies. Yes, they have 24-hour nannies, which is so helpful for those people who have those resources. But many people don't have those resources. And they are doing it, especially the onus of these responsibilities many times does fall to the mom, the main parent, and caretaking responsibilities, the person whose body is falling apart, so to speak. So I think that sheer level of sleep deprivation and with your body healing and the overwhelm, one can easily fall into mental health challenges because you're so tired.
I mean, I can attest to that because I always often talk about how my postpartum insomnia was kind of what worsened my depression because the fact that I couldn't actually sleep when I was so tired and I wanted to sleep and I knew I had to rest, but I couldn't. And so what I'm hearing from you is because you had the support of other people like your spouse, your mother, your mother-in-law, it helped you get that rest. That maybe that is the magic thing to one of the magic keys to preventing mental health challenges.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. To circle back, it's the support that I had. So even during the day, my husband would give the bottle at night. So I would get like 4 hours, right? He would do one feed. He would help change diapers. During the day, my mom would force me to rest, have a nap, take care of, I did try to pump a little bit, or even hand express so she could help give milk. She would take care of the baby and give the baby massages and floor time so that I could rest, even if it was closing my eyes on the couch next to my mom and son or daughter on the floor. And just have me sit, would give me food. My mother-in-law too would take all these burdens off of my shoulders. So like I said, I wasn't drowning. I had the rest I needed, even if it couldn't be at night, during the day. And that just helped me struggle a little bit less. And I will say one of the stories I like to tell is that when I was pregnant, my mother took a postpartum massage course so that she learned how to properly give postpartum massage. And every morning for 3 weeks, she gave me a postpartum massage before preparing my herbal sitz bath. And it was a legit massage. It was so nurturing and so needed. I can't believe I had that. I felt very lucky. And just having that care and I don't want to undermine everything that my husband did, having my husband do so much, take care of my baby, he was working. So he was juggling a lot, but as you all know, and I'm sure all the listeners can attest to, it's a lot to run a household and take care of kids. It's not a one-person job. And for the single parents out there, they are doing God's work. And hopefully, I think some of my friends who are single parents, what helps them be successful is they have a very good community and support system. So they don't have to necessarily do everything on their own.
That village support really is important. However you create it, however it shows up and looks, it doesn't have to be family, but there needs to be some sort of support. And we've talked about this in other episodes where if we were to, redo our postpartum, and giving people advice going forward, it's find your village and make that however it looks. It may not be how you picture it or maybe what you envision or want it to be, but you will have to sort of create something.
Definitely.
Thank you for sharing that. You've also mentioned in one of your Instagram reels that you breastfed both your children for quite a long time, and which our modern Western world, it's very hard to do that because we have lack of maternity leave support or even support for lactating working mothers. What do you feel like helped you maintain such a long breastfeeding journey with your children?
I will say first that it was something I wanted to do. So it was my choice that I wanted to do this for as long. I had a goal for my son, a year. And then for my daughter, I actually wanted to get to 2 years, as is recommended by WHO, the World Health Organization. So I had the goal. I wanted to do it. And my support system got on board with what I wanted to do, but it had to come from me. So for me, I'm the kind of person, if I set a goal for myself, I'm going to strive to reach that goal. Now, I had a support system that supported my desires and my goals. And I had a network or a system set up in my life to help me reach those goals. So I would do things like wake up at 4 a.m. to pump. But I had my husband there, right, in case my kid woke up and needed a diaper changed. I had a lot of foods, that helped me. So I wasn't depleted. My body was not depleted. So I had food that was made for me. And I was able to structure my life. I had a flexible work schedule. I think that's very important. So I had the opportunity to pump. So I didn't have, for example, there are people within the Mrs. Patel's community, they're teachers. They can't take breaks. It's very hard. You're supposed to, but it's quite hard. They'll be in the classroom, they might get interrupted. We have customers and people within our community that are in the healthcare industry, the healthcare community, and they're nurses. They do any number of jobs. We have people who were surgeons, for example. You cannot stop surgery to pump. You're going to be leaking. You're going to be in pain. It's very tough. And I was fortunate to have a more flexible work schedule. And then when my daughter was 4.5 months old, I started my own company. So I was working on my own and I had absolute flexibility to pump and nurse. And I think one of the major reasons people stop breastfeeding, despite what their goals may be, is that they don't have the support system in the workplace that they need to reach those goals. And you have to do, for lack of a better way to say this, a cost-benefit analysis. You can't do it at work. It's so stressful. You're so overwhelmed. You have to make that choice. You can have the fight. Sometimes you simply can't do it with your profession and career, which you may want to keep. Something you've worked very hard for. And you have to make the decision, is me, my goals, my career, my job, this is supporting my family and myself, or breastfeeding. And so people have to make this very hard choice sometimes. So I was a writer out of college up until I had my daughter. Well, 6 months after I had my daughter. And I was able to have this very unconventional, flexible job. I mean, I worked for a new site. So I did have to go in and do the things but it was a small startup. But I had to pump in my boss's office because it was a loft space, and that was the only space to pump in. And my boss's office had an entire window that had no curtains that overlooked the street. And then the door was all glass. So people could see in. And I worked with all men. I was the only woman. And so I had to pump with put up towels and then pump with a nursing cover on. So I did have to do some of that. I did have to kind of get the working mom haze, if you will. But even then, it was so much better than all the stories that I hear within our community. I think that, just circling back, it's very hard to reach your breastfeeding goals if your support system, your life, your career can't also support that. But I was fortunate enough to be able to reach my breastfeeding goals because I was lucky enough to be able to carve that space out for myself. So it was a choice, and I was fortunate enough that there's a level of luck that I was able to have that ability to breastfeed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think especially, I think the Pump Act passed recently. Was that? I don't remember. I'm trying to put a date on that one, but I know that it's been many, many years of trying to pass more policies. So things like having to pump in your boss's fully windowed office is not something that is okay anymore. So I know that there are efforts out there to make it more accessible, and we still have a long ways to go. And especially because we know breastfeeding plays a role in the development of postpartum mood disorders. Specifically, studies have shown that breastfeeding can decrease the risk of postpartum depression. So studies show that breastfeeding at 2 months postpartum can decrease the risk of postpartum depression by the time they're at 4 months postpartum. But then we also see that women who had postpartum depression at 2 months postpartum were less likely to still be breastfeeding at 4 months postpartum. And the listeners can't see, but Jasmine's raising her hand. She's like, that was me. I was that statistic. What do you think lactating mothers need in especially those crucial early months where they're more at risk of postpartum depression, trying to get their milk supply established? What do you think they need to help support them in both of those things, both their breastfeeding journey as well as their mental health?
One of my rules is, as a mother and in talking about breastfeeding and lactating people, is choose yourself. You have to do it, and what that means is not be selfish. Do what you have to do for you. I joke that I am the captain of the ship, and if the captain goes down, the ship sinks. And you have to choose yourself. So, for example, I had my breastfeeding goals. It was what I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough, and I wish it wasn't luck. I wish it just wasn't luck to have those support systems in place to be able to reach those goals. But if it doesn't serve you, and at a certain point it is draining, mentally hard, you're running around, first of all, you're not going to be producing that much milk. Stress affects your milk supply so drastically. I think people, we have people in our community come to us and they're so stressed out. And they're like, oh my God, my milk supply is going down. I'm like, let's take a deep breath, because it's affecting your milk supply. That's the first thing you can do is let's take a deep breath. So I think you have to choose yourself. So if it doesn't fully serve you, if it becomes detrimental, if it is moving you backwards, and if it is hurting you, then you have to take a good look at what you're trying to do and make a decision. Because if it's hurting you, let's choose a different feeding method. How can we make you feel better? So let's say at the very beginning, you just had your child. One of the things you can do is pretty simple, and that's just put your baby on your body and do skin to skin. Just hold your baby, just snuggle. The first thing you could do as soon as the child gives birth, and if your child's in NICU, you do what you can when you can, hold them, which is very important for the child development. and just hold your child, do skin to skin, and as soon as you can, breastfeed. So this is something I'd wanted to do going into birth. So I made sure I let the hospital staff know that I'd like to do skin to skin. I did not have a C-section. I was able to do it right away. And I started breastfeeding immediately. And trying to get the hang of it, the hospital had, and most hospitals do have a lactation professional, so they helped me with the latch and, gave me a little rundown. It was easier with my second child, as many things are. But if my first child, that lactation professional was invaluable. And during my stay in the hospital, a couple of days, I was able to see them a few times and just get any tips. And so if you can do skin to skin and you can nurse as soon as you can, that is the first thing you can do to put you on a path of breastfeeding, if that's your goal. And then you just kind of nurse as the baby's hungry. And I think that there's so much pressure on breastfeeding mothers and lactating people. There's so much pressure because breast milk is quite good for you. It's so beneficial. It's the most beneficial nutrition you can give your child. But if the captain of the ship is not doing well, the ship is going to sink. And life is more complicated than that. So thank God we have formula, really good formula. I also, because I pumped, and you want to pump consistently to keep up your supply, I had, with both my children, extra milk. I was able to donate it both times. I was able to donate to a mother who had cancer and wasn't able to nurse her child due to the drugs and treatments that she was going through. And I was able to do that a couple times. I wasn't an oversupplier, but my daughter, as I said, would not take a bottle. But I needed it for daycare. So don't even ask me how the daycare people got her to do a bottle. It was really at night she wouldn't take a bottle, which is when I needed her to take a bottle. But circling back, there's ways that you can get milk, even if it's a little bit. You don't need a ton of breast milk. You need very little to get the antibodies in a 24-hour period. You don't need 5 ounces. You need like an ounce. Don't quote me on that. That's not a direct quote. But it's depending on how old your child is. You can still cuddle your child and hold your child. What your child needs is a mom and a caretaker and a parent that's doing the best that they can. And another story, when I was 3 months old, my mother had to go back to India with my older brother and had to stop breastfeeding me abruptly. And I was given formula by my aunt who took care of me for until I was a year old. And I think I turned out fine. And even though my mom, we had such a tradition in our family, and many Indian families as well, and other cultures do the same, something very similar, life happens. And she had to go take care of a family emergency back in India. I did not have, as an infant, my breastfeeding parent was not there anymore. You have to make hard decisions sometimes, whether it's for work or family emergency or your mental health. If you're not doing well, pushing through, can you imagine going through postpartum depression and then just nursing, especially if you have breastfeeding challenges, it will just add on to your overwhelm, I can imagine, and your list of responsibilities. It also adds to how you might feel as a parent. You might feel perhaps that you have failed. And I want to tell all those people out there, you are not failing. You are winning by choosing yourself. You're winning by choosing yourself. That's how you're surviving.
I love this so much because I feel like these were the things that I needed to hear when I was giving up breastfeeding. And I knew I was doing it for my mental health, but it still had a lot of guilt that weighed on me. There was a lot of that pressure. Like you said, breast milk, we know, is a good thing for babies. It's very beneficial to them. And that mindset that I was holding on to was that I'm going to be an awful mother if I'm depriving my child of this very beneficial thing that only I can make. And so sometimes when I see the things about like, wow, breast milk is so wonderful and it's amazing, I feel a little bit of grief that I wasn't able to go through with that. But at the same time, I also am nodding my head a lot when you're saying, but you need to choose you, and your baby needs you more than your baby needs that breast milk, no matter how beneficial that breast milk is. And so I think you kind of answered our other question about like, how do we kind of empower moms to make feeding choices for their mental health without added pressure or guilt of, am I depriving my child of something? No, you are not depriving your child if you're giving them a mother that is functional and there and present for them. So I want to just reiterate for our listeners, like everything that Anhoni just said here was so beautiful and like healing to me, even on this side of it. So do what you can, however long you can. If it's a day, if it's a week, if it's 2 weeks, if it's a month, if it's 2 years, do what you can. And if you don't want to, that's also another thing. We are all in this helping and supporting each other as moms to just be the best that we can for our baby. And only you know what's the best for your baby.
Yeah,
So.
and you're also the only person that knows what's best for you. And how courageous, how brave to make such a hard choice. People deserve awards to make that choice. It's such a tough choice. And to choose yourself, to choose to thrive, not just survive, that's an award-winning choice. Possibly the harder choice to not do that goal. It's the hardest choice. That's when it's most courageous. Not when it's easy, when it's hard. My kids are 15 and 13 and they're great. But are they great because I breastfed them? No, they're great because I parented them. I was there. I do so much conscious parenting, even though I mess up all the time. That breastfeeding choice was for me. Another story, if I can share. When my daughter was an infant, about 2 months old, I was at a wedding and I had a medical emergency. And I had to get taken away in an ambulance. And the medical emergency was self-inflicted somewhat because I don't know if you've ever been to an Indian wedding, but part of the Indian wedding is you steal the groom's shoes before they get on the wedding platform. And me and my sisters were trying to steal the groom's shoes. And he is tall, over 6 feet tall, and a strong, strapping groom. And he fell on my neck. And I strained my neck and I couldn't move. And I had to get taken away in an ambulance. And I could not, I had an MRI and I could not nurse. Now, I did not bring my pump with me. I didn't have a pump. I wasn't pumping because we all know my daughter would not take a bottle and she was with me and she was 2 months old. So I had to give her formula. Now, I was taken away in an ambulance. So my whole family scrambled. One of my aunts grabbed my daughter. One of my parents grabbed my son. He was not nursing, but she was. And they were like, she's hungry. What do we do? And my brother, who is in the healthcare industry, just said, okay, go to the store and get this formula, right? I'm not even able to really speak. So he's making decisions. And that was a hard decision for me, but they needed to feed her. So someone ran to the store. And this is during a huge wedding, like right in the middle of it. All these things are happening. And, someone went to the store, got a whole bunch of the formula, and she would have to be on formula for a little bit until I could recover and get off of these medications. And it is what it is. Pending that, they're fine. Like, meaning not pending that, but that was a funny story. That did not affect their health, didn't affect who they are, didn't affect them as people. The thing that affects children who grow into adults is how they are raised and how their parents are present with them. And if something is taking you away from being as present as you can, you have to cut that out. So that's the hardest decision, to choose to be a good parent.
I do think it's so interesting, just even the pressures of like people trying to tell mothers how to feed their babies. Because like in the 80s, right, it was like people were much more about formula, or you think about certain generations where it's like, oh, you're breastfeeding. Because I remember when I was breastfeeding, I would have family members be like, how do you know how much he's getting? Or like, oh, like kind of judging the breastfeeding. And then now we're in this generation, which is the flip side, where the people are now judging the formula. So it's like, you can't win either way. Someone's always going to have an opinion about how you feed your baby. And I love the captain of the ship analogy, because it really is like, this is your baby. This is your body. You can either do it this way, you can either do it that way. And we just have to really empower our mothers and parents more. Like, what does that even look like in our culture? Like, one of the things you shared with us in our pre-interview questions is just that this lack of postpartum traditions here in the US specifically. And in Jasmine's episode, one of our first episodes in the first season, we talked about her own experience with Chinese postpartum tradition of confinement. However, we came to discover that integrating this Eastern tradition into the Western world was met with a lot of challenges. Like, to your point, there's all this like resting, and it's because there's people waiting on you hand and foot. But like, we don't necessarily have that village here. What do you think needs to change about what is available for postpartum mothers when it comes to incorporating postpartum traditions?
That is a great question. And it's something I grapple with quite a bit because there's so many different cultures and backgrounds in this country. There just isn't one singular tradition. What might be good to see is when two things. When one takes a class, there's options offered of what postpartum might look like and what doable things people can do. Or in the hospital, a handout. Like, hey, one can do X, Y, and Z. It's just also so challenging because every family looks different. Every support system looks different. You might be surprised. I have some friends who are midwives. How many partners are not on board with the program? How many partners are on their phone scrolling when their wife is in labor? I can understand. I had a 29-hour labor, but you can tell if someone's checked out or taking a break. And not so many people have different kinds of support systems, whatever that might look like. So it's hard to be like, hey, take a bath or go for a walk. I'm like, that is easier said than done. But I don't have any viable or easy advice in that to establish some kind of postpartum practices because so many people's lives are different and so many people are going through different things. So even if you got some kind of handout with tips, who's going to do that for you at home? You need everyone to be on board. And you need to have that support system. And I think it's very hard. I think it's very, very hard. And very hard to do in such a diverse country where people are coming from so many different backgrounds. Even hospitals do things differently. Some hospitals, like for example, if you give birth in a hospital in Japan or Korea, the care is going to look very different. The postpartum care is going to look very different than it does in different hospitals in the United States.
I think one thing that comes to my mind, and you're saying like, it's very diverse, right? People are going to also want to uphold different traditions and things too. There's no cookie cutter answer, like one size fits all, obviously. But I do think one theme is that we need to honor this postpartum period more, like elevate it and sort of come to view it as more sacred, which I don't think is as big of a deal in the US for some reason. I mean, clearly, like we don't even have the proper like paid leave laws in every state and these kinds of things. The mother is like discarded after the baby comes. And so to me, I'm hearing like, these are important. There's a reason we have traditions and things throughout generations and decades and eons, because we have to take care of the mother. And I think we've kind of lost sight of that, which is why there's rise in mental health problems in postpartum. So to me, I feel like that's the part that was kind of missing. For me, trying to integrate Western and Eastern, I think it was hard because it was an identity crisis too, I think, like just even finding myself in postpartum. So that made it difficult for me. I'm not sure if you're aware, I actually had an Ayurvedic doula So when I was going into pregnancy and stuff, I did a lot of things. She did like an Ayurvedic analysis. She like evaluated all my like doshas and like my vata pitta, like everything was like, oh, you have an imbalance here. She like evaluated my spit to be like, let me take a look at like exactly. So she really practiced a lot of these things. I had to drink like certain cumin tea in the mornings and things like that. I did sesame oil massages on myself. But in the postpartum, I dropped the ball a lot. And I think because I didn't have her support in postpartum, like I was missing a lot of that. I hear you talking about, the bads and things like that. And then the other thing is like, while I was mixing a lot of this stuff, like she prepared placenta pills for me. But then 2 weeks into postpartum, I got mastitis. So I had to
So did I.
too. Okay, yeah. I had to take antibiotics like 4 times a day. And she said, stop the placenta pills because then, your body's like, you have a fever right now, so you need to stop that. And my dad was preparing Chinese herbal teas, and oh my God, it was so complicated. It was like, you have to drink this tea 30 minutes before you eat food. But my antibiotics had to be taken on an empty stomach. And I'm like trying to time all this in my head, like, how do I do all of this together? And then at what point do I breastfeed? What time do I go to sleep? And so I think that's why I was like a total like mess. And then part of my mind went to like, is this Eastern medicine going to be interacting with my Western medicine? Are these Chinese herbs going to be interacting with my antibiotics? Is that the reason I'm feeling off? Is it because of my placenta pills? I don't know. Even as a pharmacist, I'm a pharmacist. I wasn't sure how to answer these questions. Herbs are not regulated by the FDA. So I'm kind of curious because you do work with Ayurvedic medicine too, and you incorporate these ingredients in your lactation teas and cookies and, or all these things. How do you advise people to know the types of ingredients they're using, Ayurvedic, herbal medicine? How can you tell if it's something of like higher quality, or what would you recommend people look for so they know like they're sourcing good ingredients for their care, postpartum care?
Great question. First of all, I wish that you had some Mrs. Patels when you're going through your period, because everything's bite-sized. Like we have the tea, but we make it easy for you because we have all those herbs in a little bite-sized thing, and that's what you have in the morning, and that's it. So we try to make these very complicated Ayurvedic medicinal things easy because it has to be convenient. You can eat it over the sink while you're holding your baby. And so I also would like to add that I am not a doctor. I am not a medical professional, and I'm not an Ayurvedic doctor. Okay. I'm not an herbalist. So I want to clarify. And all the herbs and our products are culinary quantities. They're culinary quantities. They're not medicinal dosages, which is a whole nother level. Okay. If you are going to take capsules, someone is going to take a medicinal dosage of something, they need to do it under my advice. My recommendation is to take it under the supervision of either a Western medical MD who knows your health history, or an Ayurvedic doctor or an herbalist. I don't recommend just taking these really high dosages of any herb, Eastern or Ayurvedic, Chinese, or Western herbal medicine, willy-nilly. You should do it under medical supervision because, for example, fenugreek, which we use a culinary quantity, but it's a very well-known, probably the most recommended galactagogue, which is an herb that helps milk supply. If you have certain medical conditions, it can interact with that. And you might not know that. On our website, it lists that if you have a list, but we had Ayurvedic doctors and medical doctors and IBCLCs, which are International Board Certified Lactation Consultants, look over our ingredients and look over our warnings. So like if you have X, Y, and Z, don't take this. And we use culinary quantities, like what you have in Indian food, for example, because we believe that medicine should be digested as food. So you should have any dosage that's higher than a culinary quantity, like a medicinal dosage, under the medical supervision, whatever that doctor looks like. So they know your health history. And what we do is we very carefully source all our herbs. So I can tell you like the farm that we got our shatavari from, where we have 2 herbs that are very specific. Rare herbs were rare. They're harder to find in bulk quantities that we source from India that are specific for postpartum healing, for joint pain, and for inflammation. And you just have to work with a brand that you trust. Like we have like a fact page. We list it. If someone was like, what's your sources? I'm like, here are our sources. I would love to tell you. We talk about our purveyors. Like I know our purveyors. So for example, even our like wheat, it's a family business. Our chocolate, family business. Our almond meal, a family business. Small business when we can. Usually the family businesses, these are like smaller family businesses, but they're still successful in some cases. Larger, I mean. And we carefully source all our herbs. Like where's this from? When was this harvested? And that's just using culinary quantities. We're just really careful. So you have to have a level of trust in eating anything, right? Lettuce, eggs, or you have to trust where it's coming from and look at their website. See, do they have like what are the ingredients do? Is it well sourced? Is it a well-respected site? And if it's a real medicinal dosage, go work with a lactation professional, a medical professional, an herbalist, or an Ayurvedic doctor. That's my recommendation.
We do have one last question. So one and a half. We have our final question, and then we ask all our guests at the very end a question. I guess we didn't tell you it, but it's basically like if you could go. Oh, you did? Okay, good. I wasn't sure.
Where do we go when we die? You know what? I wasn't going to tell you no. What's the meaning of life?
I knew she was going to be funny. When I saw those reels, I was like, she's going to be a funny one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask the next question. What inspired you to start your company when your daughter was only 4 months old? I'm sure motherhood is just terribly busy and tiring. And she's your second born, I believe, right? So you're just like, I have 2 kids now. I'm 4 months postpartum. I'm going to start a company. What inspired you to be done with this writing job? I'm going to start a company.
I wanted to help other mothers like myself, other new parents, lactating people like myself, get through postpartum and breastfeeding with the kind of nurturing and support that I received. I wanted to share it. Lots. As I became a mom and I met so many other mothers, they were out there on their own. They were on that ledge on their own. They did not have, forget my mom, Mrs. Patel, who I named the company after. They didn't have the resources. Food is so integral to life and very integral, I believe, to postpartum healing and breastfeeding and functioning as a person. It gives me the greatest joy, food. And what you eat matters, especially during these hard times. And I wanted to share that, plain and simple. I didn't want to make $1 million. I wasn't in it for the money, which is probably not the best way to start a business. I was in it to help people. Like they're like, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, to help people. And that's not an exit strategy. But my goal was to help one single person. And if I had helped one single person get through this period, then I had done my job. And 13 years later, I'm very honored to say that I have definitely helped more than one single person. And so that's why, and I will say one of the highlights of my life, and definitely for my career for this food business, is when my grandmother, who's on my website and who helped me develop my recipe with my mom, with my mother, when she was passing, I got to, see her. I brought all the flyers and I brought the pamphlets. And she's featured on our pamphlets, and I got to show her what her legacy had contributed to, what she as a person had contributed to, and that, excuse me, I get emotional every time I tell this story, but that her legacy was going to live on, and the work that she had done and her life's work will have helped so many other people even after she had passed on. And be able to tell her about the company and show her what we had made, what she had helped make, was the biggest honor of my life. And after that, everything else is a cherry on top. Being able to help show that to someone as they were passing, nothing beats it.
I just love that you have such strong women to look up to, and that you are a strong woman for your daughter to look up to. And that is just a beautiful way, I think, of honoring your past your past and your future. So thank you for
so
sharing
much.
that.
Thank you so much.
I feel like what you're able to accomplish is putting a Mrs. Patel's in everyone's home. Like when I see the stories on Instagram and the people who don't have the food is medicine type of support, that they can get it from you. And while they don't have a physical Mrs. Patel in their home giving them a massage or helping them change a diaper, just even the nurturing with the food is so powerful. Like, I had a friend who just had a baby and she asked me a lot of questions about breastfeeding. I'm a certified breastfeeding peer counselor, which is not the same thing as an IBLCLC. But I was able to give her some education, and then I sent her some Mrs. Patel's treats. And I said, if you're worried about your supply or anything, or you feel like you just need to keep your energy up, I loved these. Here these are. And you put, again, a Mrs. Patel in everyone's home.
I would love that. Wouldn't that be amazing? And I want to, even if you choose not to breastfeed, you choose not to give breast milk, the lactation treats, the lactation teas, they all have postpartum healing elements, which you need regardless of how you feed your child. You need to get that body back together, girl. And so you need to have your inflammation. So even if you don't feed from day one breast milk, they help you regardless of what your feeding choices may be. And you still need to eat. You still need to survive. You still need your body to heal whatever feeding choice you make. So that's also part of the postpartum tradition. People have different things. Sometimes you're going to take off to India at 3 months old, right? When your infant's 3 months old, then you got to do what you got to do. You have to stop and choose the captain. And it's for yourself, regardless of how you feed. That might need to be a new catchphrase. It's for yourself, regardless of how you feed.
Yeah, it is. Oh, Anhoni, we really loved all this discussion with you. It's kind of everything I think we were hoping to get out of it. So you are as lovely in person as you are on your Instagram. So
thank you so much.
One last question we like to wrap up with our guests. We ask all of our guests, in the spirit of healing your tigress, what would current day Anhoni say to the past version of you in some of her hardest times?
It's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. It will pass. And when you look back on it, none of this will have mattered as much as you think it will have mattered. Yes. And I'm crying because that's the advice my father, who I didn't get to talk about in this podcast, who was very, very close to, that's the advice he gave to me when he was passing. That it's going to be okay. The things that you stress out about now are not as important as you think they may be. And it's all going to work out.
Oh, thank you for sharing such raw pieces of yourself with us and our listeners. I think this is going to help somebody out there. For those of you, our listeners, who might not know where to find you, I think we've mentioned it, but where can people find more of you?
They can find us on our website, mrsmilk.com, www.mrsmilk.com. We are also sold on Amazon. And if you're local to the Bay Area, you can find us at Natural Resources on Valencia Street in the Mission.
Love that. And check her out on Instagram at Mrs. Patel.
Come and say hi. Give us a DM.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. I didn't think that I'd be crying, but I shouldn't be surprised that there'd be tears. Happy tears. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Healing the Tigress. The more we share these stories, the more we can help other AAPI mothers and partners. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to keep supporting this mission, please hit the subscribe button to the show and take a few seconds to leave a rating. An extra big thanks if you would also leave a review to boost our show visibility and help other AAPI folks find us.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Healing the Tigress, or even better, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Healing the Tigress podcast to support us more. Inside the Patreon, we will be offering more bonus episodes, sneak peeks, and a community for you to help shape our podcast too. Thanks for being here.
Healing the Tigress is produced and edited by Peggy and Jasmine.
Music for this show is remixed by Dr. Tony Huynh of Tony Mixes.
Our intro music is a cover of You and Me by Z Avi, played by our co-host Peggy.
Our outro music is a cover of Green Island Serenade, played by Jasmine's sister.
Cover art design is by Dr. Angela Chung.